Recently released Resident Evil Village, Nintendo was the big winner this year with a new Metroid game, Metroid Dread, and the trailer showing off the upcoming Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild sequel. That's Fox Bits for Fox News.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Cordial, but was it productive? I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News.
The meeting, it was substantive, it was concrete.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin speaking through an interpreter, reacting to his sit-down Wednesday with President Biden, each man holding his own post-summit news conference.
President Biden says he sees a genuine prospect of improving relations with Russia.
I don't think he's looking for a Cold War with the United States.
Speaking after just under 3 hours of talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Geneva, President Biden said the leaders discussed fundamental issues, including cyber attacks.
Letting him know where I stood, what I thought we could accomplish together, and what, in fact, if there were violations of American sovereignty, what we would do.
Both leaders say the summit went well, but divisions on cybersecurity and human rights remain clear.
Fox's Simon Owen, former President Trump weighing in on the summit.
I think it was a good day for Russia. I don't see what we got out of it.
Telling Fox's Hannity that President Biden gave Putin a win just by sitting down with him. President Biden is now back at the White House after the flight home from Geneva. The phrase, build the wall, is back, this time from Texas Governor Greg Abbott.
We will build the wall, we will secure the border, but most importantly, we will restore safety to the citizens who live in the Lone Star State.
Governor Abbott says he'll hire a project manager to oversee construction of a state wall at the border and encourages people who own property near it to donate slices of it to the project. He says Texans are paying the price for the federal government's refusal to enforce immigration law. The crackdown on democracy in Hong Kong is escalating. Early Thursday, police arrested 5 editors at a daily newspaper and charged them with violating the national security law by publishing 30 articles encouraging foreign governments to sanction Hong Kong and China for limiting civil liberties. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. We're back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have MyCloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and rooting for you. Member FDIC.
A key Senate Democrat who opposes much of a federal elections reform bill, offering proposals to change it.
West Virginia Democrat Joe Manchin is the only senator in his party not to support S1, an election overhaul bill seen by Democrats as necessary to counter new voter laws passing in Republican-led states. But Manchin is offering changes to the bill he would support, including a voter ID provision. Georgia Democrat John Ossoff says the negotiations are good.
We need to unite as a caucus to pass substantive federal voting rights protections and guarantees.
But with or without Manchin, Republicans still oppose the measure. It is unlikely to survive the 60 votes needed to break a filibuster. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
The U.S. will soon have a new federal holiday commemorating the end of slavery. The House voting 415 to 14 on Wednesday to make Juneteenth or June 19th the 12th federal holiday. Juneteenth commemorates June 19th, 1865. That was the day that Union soldiers brought the news of freedom to enslaved black people in Galveston. 2 months after the Confederacy had surrendered, the bill now goes to President Biden, who is likely to sign it. The Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve warning Wednesday interest rate hikes are coming eventually.
The central bank signaled that it may act sooner to start dialing back the low interest rate policies that have helped fuel a rapid rebound from the pandemic's effect. But for now, Fed Chair Jerome Powell says the central bank will
maintain the current 0 to 1/4%
2% target range for the federal funds rate until labor market conditions have reached levels consistent with the committee's assessment of maximum employment, and inflation has risen to 2% and is on track to moderately exceed 2% for some time.
It appears that interest rates will rise by late 2023. Hillary Barsky, Fox News.
Wall Street lower Wednesday on the news. The Dow dropped 265 points. NASDAQ down 33. The S&P 500 lost 22. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro in Tucumán has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tucumán. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Get your shot and win big prizes, Guam. The Office of the Governor and the Guam Visitors Bureau presents Vaccine Win Guam. Protect our community by getting your shot and enter online at visitguam.com/vax for a chance to win. Starting June 14th to July 21st, we'll be giving away weekly prizes of $10,000 cash and a brand new car to lucky residents who are fully vaccinated. That's 6 weeks of Vaccine Win opportunities. Some conditions apply. Log on to visitguam.com/vax for official promo rules or to submit your entry today. Let's Vaccine Win, Guam!
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's a really good way to start a radio talk show, especially this one. This program being a Constitution-oriented conservative talk show that considers all points of view and rejects those that are not proper. Proper meaning ones that I agree with.
Or at least welcome.
Yeah. I start out with the Second Amendment. Oftentimes I have a little story about the Second Amendment that I read into the record. Today I've got a long story. It's entitled Brandon Smith, the real reason why California leftists are terrified of the AR-15. Yeah. Now, we just had a decision from a district court in California that said that a ban on AR-15s is unconstitutional, and that's what this story picks up. This past week, a U.S. district judge in California struck down the state's 30-year ban on high-capacity semi-automatic rifles, which leftists label assault weapons. The judge called the ban unconstitutional, which it is. In response, the progressive media has lost their collective minds, screeching in horror at the idea of AR-15 rifles being legal within the borders of their carefully manicured socialist utopia state. That's California. That's the one where the major cities have homeless people living in garbage in their downtowns.
I saw an image of Muscle Beach the other day, Venice Beach.
Venice Beach.
It's crazy.
Really?
It wasn't like that when I saw it in the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gotten to the point in California that you really can't have anything nice anymore.
It's tent city.
It is, and the government has given up on enforcing anything that looks like the law.
Unless you have an AR-15.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, fear is rarely a rational thing. When someone operates based on fear, They tend to make terrible decisions and support oppressive causes and laws. Fear leads to an obsession with control. Fearful people also tend to look at large mobs of other terrified people so they can feel safe and secure and anonymous. They want to be able to act impulsively on their fears without having to face consequences for it later. Leftists are driven primarily by two factors: narcissism and, yes, fear. I've discussed their narcissism at great length in past articles. Now I think we should delve into the fear. The most common leftist retort to the question, why are you so afraid of the AR-15, will usually be a snort of indignant disbelief, followed by the words, because it's a military weapon designed to kill a lot of people quickly. Idiot. But this is not an argument. It's an expression of irrational fear. Why are they, as individuals, afraid of the AR-15? What are the chances that they will ever be faced with a person intent on killing them with an AR-15? And why do they believe that disarming innocent, law-abiding Americans will somehow save them from their paranoia? Let's examine the first issue of statistical probability. How many people are actually killed by AR-15s each year? Not many, according to the FBI, which does not track the stats on specific rifles, but does track the stats on rifles altogether. And as it turns out, only around 6% of all gun deaths involve rifles in the U.S. each year. How much of that involves the use of military-grade rifles like AR-15? It's impossible to say, but even if it was half or 3% of all gun-related crimes, that would still mean you have a far more of a chance of being murdered by a knife or a blunt object than an AR. By extension, rifles overall are dwarfed by handgun murders. So again, why are you leftists so afraid of the AR-15? It seems like the AR-15 is a favorite among mass shooters because of its, quote, efficiency. So is this reason enough to be fearful? According to the New York Times' own analysis, the AR-15 was used to kill 173 people in mass shootings in the U.S. from 2007 to 2017, meaning around 17 homicides per year over a decade can be attributed to the rifle. Again, the AR is dwarfed by almost all other weapons in homicide, including knives, even when accounting for mass shootings. The sheer number of military-grade weapons in the hands of civilians in the U.S. should be mass homicides everywhere if you take the common position of the typical progressive gun grabber. But this is not the case. In fact, if you want to increase your chances of being killed by a gun, move to a Democrat-run city like Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, or Chicago. In Chicago, there were 4,033 shootings and 784 homicides, predominantly in black neighborhoods and primarily with handguns. So statistically, access to AR-15s does not increase gun homicides. But what about living in a black neighborhood in leftist-run Chicago under some of the strictest gun laws in the country? Yes, your chances of being shot are much higher, just not by an AR-15. I'm going to pick this up again and finish it tomorrow, but I think you're getting the point here. AR-15 is just a rallying point. It's dog whistle politics for the Democrats. If you want to be a Democrat, you better memorize some anti-AR-15 rhetoric, or you can't play. You can't call yourself a Democrat. Sorry, folks, but those are the rules. Okay, let's go from here to Zemi Ikotny. So our version of Meet the Press, Zemi Ikotni, my backwards bilingual play on words, translated literally, Zemi Ikotni is press the meat. We turn it around to Meet the Press. We're so much better than Chuck Todd and his version of Meet the Press on PMSNBC. It's hardly worth the comparison. Starting out again with the Daily News, here's their editorial: break the cycle of poverty by building reliable transit system. This sounds sort of like simple, doesn't it? If there was one step that the island could take to break the cycle of poverty, it's to fix the mass transit system. Well, there's no mass transit system to fix. As I've explained on more than one occasion, we don't have and we've never had a mass transit system. We spent a lot of money on administrative costs and executive salaries and put a few buses on the street to operate in an extremely inefficient fashion, but we've never had a mass transit system. Next sentence in the editorial: we want our people employed and contributing to our tax base. To do that, residents need transportation to get jobs. People can't always afford to buy a car nor afford the insurance and the maintenance. An alternative to this is mass transportation. However, the island's mass transportation system has never been reliable enough on which to depend. Kind of like what I said. It has been a system patched together by private contractors, leased buses, limited resources, etc. Residents trying to use the system to get to work or school on time are often left waiting for hours for a bus to show up. The operations have changed a bit. A GPS system to track drivers and 10 electric buses scheduled to arrive later this year, but that's still not enough to service the island efficiently and dependably. The Mass Transit Authority pleaded its case to lawmakers earlier this week, explaining that it will need 60 drivers in the next year and a half to be able to continue to expand its services. The agency has been able to reduce costs by $500,000 by streamlining its operations and ending the $74 an hour cost of using private contractors. Based on those figures, it seems as if the agency has proven that it's capable of efficiently managing its operations. There are also plans for expansion. However, revenue projections for 2022 seem to be low. The agency is looking at less than 10% increase in year-over-year revenues, especially when compared to a year that hardly anyone was out and about. Now, I got to jump in here again and stress some basics. The people who ride the bus right now are poor people that don't have a choice. They don't have cars. They don't know anybody has a car. So for them, they default to the bus system. It's the transportation of last resort. And as this editorial points out, it's very unreliable. As a matter of basic economics, you can't build a system that markets itself to people who can't afford to buy your product. So if we are keying our mass transit system to people, break the cycle of people who are in poverty, it's never going to work. Because you see, the people in poverty don't have any money, and they aren't going to be able to pony up enough money to pay for a real transportation system. If we had a real transportation system, that is a fleet of reliable buses operating on marketably sound routes, we could set up a system where we could let the people who don't have any money ride for nothing. We'd be way ahead of the game. As I pointed out a million times, if we'd have had a real bus system when I was working in Agania, I would have walked from Paris Acres down to Marine Corps Drive. If I had known that a bus would be along in no later than 15 minutes, I'd have jumped on that bus and I'd ridden to Agania. In a real bus system, we would have had a short shuttle service in Agania, so I could get from one of the bus stops that I used down there to where I was working. It would have saved me money. It would have saved me tremendous amounts of time, because when I'm driving, I can't read. And if I can't read, I'm not really productive. So I would have done that in a heartbeat, but we never even came close to having anything like that. If we had something like that, then we might be able to attract people with a few coins in their pocket to ride the bus, making the bus system, here's a key word, sustainable. And if it were, then we wouldn't have to charge fees to people that can't afford to pay, fares to people who can't afford to pay the fares. Until we get to that point, my analysis is this: set up a capability at public health to determine who these poor people are. It shouldn't be hard. SNAP cards, welfare, Medicaid, etc. Give these people identification cards. Let them take taxis to work and reimburse cab fare. You know, you'd be probably hiring one more clerk at Public Health and Social Services to manage this, but you wouldn't have to have the gigantic executive infrastructure that you have right now. If you want to be a little exotic, we've got a couple of services on the island. One of them is called, what's it called again, Tony?
GRTA?
No, the equivalent of Lyft and...
oh, yeah.
But you just mentioned it the other day.
Yeah.
Stroll.
Stroll there.
Yeah, there's Stroll, and then there's another one. So maybe we could cut an exclusive deal with one of those companies and reimburse fare so that those people could get to work. But to say, well, we've got to improve a system so that poor people can ride on it, and the system's got to be profitable. No, that's not going to work. So you got to work on this one a little bit more, Daily News. No blue star for you today.
Didn't last week they had an op-ed where they were saying no more bus stops and get the government out of transit system?
They were.
Oh no, wait. They said we need to do more than bus stops.
Yeah.
And get the government out of the transit system.
Yeah. They buy more buses and then get the government out of the transit system. Yeah. Right. Okay, here's the post. Families without child care needed more notice, time to prepare. On Tuesday, the Department of Labor announced that parents can no longer file for pandemic unemployment assistance because they don't have daycare or another program for their kids while they're at work. There was very little notice, if any, of this change before this week, which means families didn't have much time to prepare. That lack of information and time will likely make it very difficult for struggling families to find ways to get care for their children while also making ends meet. GDOL director, who is actually the director of labor, David Del Isola, said this option was originally made available because many child care centers were closed. Lack of child care is no longer a qualified eligibility for PUA based on U.S. Department of Labor guidance, so the filing of claims should stop, Del Isola told the Daily Post. And if a resident continues to file PUA knowing this criteria is no longer a valid reason, they could face penalties for fraud if determined ineligible, Del Isola said. With everything Guam families have had to go through this past year, dropping this information right when the eligibility is changing makes things that much more difficult. U.S. DOL reminded the public of previously released guidance involving child care under the so-called option small d. Local officials said Tuesday PUA has helped some 30,000 pandemic-impacted workers, including those who had quit their jobs or cut their work hours so they could care for their children, most of whom were doing online learning at home during the pandemic. Del Isola said with summer school and summer camps now open, then, quote, whatever parents typically did for children during the summer months pre-COVID applies, which allows parents to go back to work. That's part of the problem. People needed time to enroll their children in summer school, summer camp, or other daycare, and find work to replace the lost PUA. Said work also would help pay for the summer camp, etc. Going on down to the punchline here. Option DD in federal law that created PUA states that an individual is covered if a child or other person in the household for which the individual has primary caregiving responsibility is unable to attend school or another facility that is closed as a direct result of the Wuhan virus public health emergency, and such school or facility care is required for the individual to work. GDOL said very few still may qualify under the DD rule, and those exceptions must be justified. Hopefully, they will be able to help families who need a little more time to find the appropriate daycare or summer program. Otherwise, many people won't have the help they need as they struggle to recover from the pandemic. Yeah, okay, you filled the news hole. Congratulations. Okay, let's go from there to the card. And today I've got Amata, that's Amata Coleman Radewagen versus Neil Weir. Neil has had some coverage in what used to be called Pacific News Center. It's now called Pacific Press Release Center. Yeah, this has been on the card as Amata versus Biden and Tina. Then I've got the governor and critical race theory versus the United States of America. I've got Pinehoff versus Lou. I've got an anonymous plaintiff named DM versus the Vatican. So we're going to need our Law and Order notebooks for both Pinehoff and this one, because you'll learn a little bit of law if you're still working on your Tall Tales Law School diploma. I've got NPR versus Tom Hanks, and then conspiracy versus truth, etc. So we'll start out with Amata versus Neil Weir. And of course, you know this goes along with, this is part of, this goes all the way back to Resolution 56. And Tina's slandering of the Navy and gaslighting us all on the meaning of the insular cases as having something to do with what's called SSI. So here is Pacific News Center for last night. And it starts out, writing for a divided panel on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit. Judge Carlos Lucero ruled that the U.S. Constitution provides no guarantee of citizenship to people born in U.S. territories. Well, that's not actually what the decision said. Let's take a short break here, and I'll come back to this one.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Hafaday, this is Congressman St. Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and see to us, Mahase.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
All All right, so the first sentence here, writing for a divided panel on U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit, Judge Carlos Lucero ruled that the U.S. Constitution provides no guarantee of citizenship to people born in U.S. territories. Well, that isn't what the ruling said. It's a 187-page decision. I've read it. I've not only read it, I've studied the whole thing. And I read it, of course, the day that it came out. But this is kind of like Ann Parasittori. You know, you paraphrase, you don't get it exactly right, but you put your own spin on it so that it will have a particular appeal to the audience that you're appealing to. So a person reading this will say, well, Wash, I live in a territory. You mean the Constitution doesn't guarantee that I'll be a citizen of the United States? Isn't that kind of scary? No, it's not. Chief Judge Timothy Timkovich wrote a short, separate concurrence. Judge Robert Bacharach, now here you go. Judge Robert Bacharach wrote a powerful 55-page dissent. A powerful dissent. Now, guess which way this article is going to be slanted.
Right.
It's slanted already. Yeah. Powerful 55-page dissent setting forth how the Constitution's text, purpose, and history all, quote, unambiguously support recognizing that the Constitution's guarantee of birthright citizenship extends to people born in U.S. territories. We are disappointed and frankly surprised by this result. Last year, the Supreme Court made clear that insular cases should not be expanded beyond their limited scope. Yet here the 10th Circuit did just that to deny the right of citizenship to people born in U.S. territories, said Neil Weir, president and founder of Equally American, which advocates for equal rights in U.S. territories and serves as co-counsel to the Fitzsimano plaintiffs. We are considering our options moving forward in the 10th Circuit's decision to ignore the Supreme Court's recent guidance narrowing the application of the insular cases in U.S. territories. You want to narrow them, that's good. Last June, in response to calls to overrule the insular cases, the U.S. Supreme Court, in response to, stated in upholding the constitutionality of the Puerto Rico Oversight Board that the insular cases should not be further extended, questioning their continued validity and calling them much criticized. Great. The 10th Circuit's majority opinion fundamentally misunderstands the historical record when it comes to questions of citizenship in American Samoa, said Charles Ilima, a prominent American Samoa attorney who serves as co-counsel to the Fitzsimano plaintiffs. Now, I suspect that the reporter called Charles up and got this quote, right?
Nope.
Quote, it's not that American Samoans have a preference against citizenship or that citizenship is not wanted. I take Congressman Amata and the government of American Samoa to simply be arguing that the question of citizenship should be decided by Congress, not recognized as a constitutional right. Indeed, American Samoa's traditional leaders believe they became citizens the moment they transferred sovereignty to the United States through the deeds of secession in 1900 and 1904. When the United States informed our traditional leaders in the 1920s that citizenship was being withheld from Americans, Samoans, they fought for decades to be recognized as U.S. citizens, only to be repeatedly denied by Congress. Now, this is...
It's incredible.
Something of an exaggeration.
This is incredible.
Okay, and of course, we know the reason they were denied by Congress. Two reasons. One reason was the U.S. Navy's opposition, of course. And what do you think the other reason was, Jose? Racism, of course, yeah. Today, concerns about U.S. citizenship in American Samoa largely turn on fears that it would threaten the preservation of our land and culture or limit self-determination. But these fears, as explained in Judge Bacharach's dissent and by other legal experts, are simply not supported by relevant legal precedent or the historical experience of other territories. Yeah.
Bob, I'm sorry, but what's powerful about this case is not the dissent, but the ruling.
Exactly. But that Neil Weir lost. So
why are we talking to the loser?
How often do we get a chance to talk to that loser? Okay, and then this report goes on. It's hard to tell which is the news report and which is Neil Weir. I suspiciously think that it's all Neil Weir. In terms of the next steps, the Fittisi plaintiffs had 45 days to consider making a request for the panel's decision by the full 10th Circuit, a process known as en banc review, or 90 days to consider seeking review from the U.S. Supreme Court, a process known as a petition for certiorari. Now, Ray mentioned this on his show this morning, and he asked me to do a short cameo, knowing that you're going to get, a little bit, even from me, a more objective review of what the decision did and what it didn't do than you're going to get from Neil Weir. So he asked me if I could advise Neil Weir on which of the three options he should follow. And I said, this would be my advice to Neil Weir. Go to Pago Pago. Meet with the leadership of American Samoa and tell them that if they want to pursue any form of self-determination, to let you know, because you'll be their advocate. Quit trying to screw over them, which is exactly what he's doing. Yeah, Neil Weir's speech to the people of America and Samoa, right? Achtung! You shall be American citizen, whether you want to or not. We have our ways. And ironically, there was a time when Germany, England, and the United States were kind of spatting about the Samoan archipelago. So a deal was cut. The Brits got colonies elsewhere, and they said U.S. could have the island of Tutuila and a couple of other islands, and the Germans could have the rest, which they promptly referred to as German Samoa. Yeah. And I was just reading, I was studying up on it, to get ready to be prepared for what I'm doing now. And I found that during the German regime in Samoa, in German Samoa, they shipped a shipload of rebellious Samoans to German Saipan. So you have to wonder, are there any Samoans in Saipan that came there courtesy of the Germans?
For sure.
Yeah. So, and then there's a link to the decision and a link to some FAQs about citizenship in American Samoa here in the article. So this is Neil Weir's take on the whole thing. And Neil Weir obviously doesn't care a lick about the people in American Samoa, their government, and what they want and what they don't want.
You know what? This is kind of a misleading quote-unquote article, because at the very top, the authorship is claimed by, it says by Pacific News Center.
Yeah.
And then when you go to the very bottom of it, they have the citation of where they get everything, Equally American Release.
Yeah.
This is not done by PNC.
No, it isn't. No, they just took the same thing they did the other day. They just take the press release and run it. And let's face it, that's a lot easier. This is a complicated subject. It's not like saying there was an auto collision on Route 15. It actually requires a real reporter to write it. And, of course, you have to recognize talent where talent exists. Neil Weir understands this, and he's developed the ability to play PNC News as though it were a cheap violin. Yeah, to get his propaganda. And most people aren't as discerning as we are. They say, well, it was on TV, so I guess it's correct. You know, I guess it was really correct about, you know, the...
Who needs reporters?
Yeah. About the powerful 55-page dissent and how badly the majority got it wrong, because it's right there in PNC News.
This is called an editorial.
Yeah. All right, so Amata kicked out her own press release, but of course she's working from American Samoa, and her press releases actually have some substance. They're not written for broadcast.
No superlatives.
Yeah, and they aren't screenplays like Weir's are.
Right.
You know, yeah, direction. Cut to man on microphone. Show pictures of American Samoa. You know. All right, this is from Congressman Amata. Released the following statement regarding the appellate decision. Thank you, first of all, to the judges for their considered opinion that respected the people of American Samoa and the Samoan way. Thank you to Mike Williams and the other attorneys at Kirkland and Ellis for their tireless work on the behalf of American Samoa and the preservation of our family land and Matai heritage. This is truly a blessing and should set this issue to rest. American Samoa has the right of self-determination. We will continue to insist on our self-determination with great love for the United States. I thought self-determination was the most important thing of all. More important than statehood, more important than voting in national elections. We have to have a choice.
But we're supposed to think insular cases are bad.
Yeah. Congress should now act to pass my bill, H.R. 1941, so that American nationals who choose citizenship can quickly, sensibly, and affordably make that change. And it's real easy. You don't have to live for 5 years in one of the 50 states. It's a very streamlined procedure, so anybody living in American Samoa that wants to be a U.S. citizen can, and without ever leaving Samoa. So the U.S. nationals who choose citizenship can quickly, sensibly, and affordably make that change. Individuals should not have roadblocks to their self-determination if they choose citizenship. We thank God for this outcome and will continue to work for these next steps. Following the Supreme Court's decision not to hear an appeal rejecting an almost identical lawsuit in 2016, and a decision by the Biden administration just last week to continue to use the so-called insular cases as a basis for defending federal policy towards the territories, I'm calling on the plaintiffs and special interests behind them. Now, who would that be? Yeah. In this case, to end their assault on the right of American Samoan people to determine for themselves whether or not to become U.S. citizens.
He's doing it for her own good.
I have been very frustrated in this process, which was already underway when I took office in 2015 in the Tuaua case. My predecessor, Falio Maveega, a guy named Ennio let's see if I could say it right here, Falio Maveega, who, when I met him back in the 70s, was working for WANPAD's committee, and his name was Annie Hunkin back in those days. Yeah. He later became Annie Famio Maveega and was elected delegate from American Samoa to the House. He was an intervener in that suit, and I readily agreed to replace him when he left. The suit, which was first filed in 2012, was rejected by the District Court, then the Court of Appeals in 2015, and finally the Supreme Court in 2016 by not hearing a further appeal. So Weir lost in the D.C. circuit. So then he thought he'd try in the 10th Circuit. So let's see, 10th Circuit, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. I think we're up to 12 circuits. He's still got 10 more circuits to go.
Usually a circus is only three. Oh, circuit. I thought you said circus.
Yeah. So he's lost in the 1st. He's lost in the 10th. California is close by. Let's try the 9th Circuit.
This is not a dance card, Neil.
Yeah. Quote, it seemed so straightforward to me that at the time that this issue was for the people to decide that I thought the Supreme Court disposition of this case would be the end of it. So I was surprised when special interests who are apparently looking for a path to national voting rights for territorial residents. And that's exactly what Weir says. Now, if you believe in conspiracies, you know, there are 4 million people living in the territories. And if you pull one of those territories out, you're left with not much over 200,000 people. What territory has all those people? Puerto Rico, right? Now, I recognize from my reading that the folks in Puerto Rico seem to be mostly in favor of statehood, the state of Puerto Rico. But there are some who are saying, no, the status we have right now is fine. We, kind of like I keep saying, we just need to keep this status and keep improving on it. So those people then would be interested in what Weir is trying to do. Because what Weir is trying to do is, let's see, how do I want to express it? I can't find it, but I just had it in front of me just a second ago. Oh, yeah. So I was surprised when the special interests, who apparently are looking for a path to national voting rights for territorial residents, found yet another plaintiff. So if you wanted to keep the status quo in Puerto Rico, then Weir's futile attempts for work on voting rights for people in the territories would be a workaround so that anti-statehood folks could say, see, we don't need statehood, we can vote, or Weir's working on that for us. So he tried to make UCAVA work for us, the Uniform Overseas Servicemen and Citizens Act. It's a hard title to remember, but what it says is this, that if you ever lived in one of the 50 states, you could send them a request identifying exactly where you lived, and they will send you a ballot for the congressman for that district, for the senator if it's a senatorial election, for the president if it's a presidential election, if you live in a foreign country. Even if you've lived there for 30 years and you say, I'd never want to go back to the United States, they will send you a ballot and you could vote. We're trying to say that should apply to Guam. But of course, the problem there is, guess what? Guam's not a foreign country. He could have had M.T. Green co-sponsor a bill with Michael St. Nicholas on that one, maybe, and it would have worked out. Yeah.
And we would have had cookies.
So the way UCAVA works for us here, if somebody from Guam moves to Timbuktu and stays there for 30 years, he will be able to vote in Guam elections, symmetrical. So Weir hung his hat on this peg. For UCAVA purposes, if you move from Wisconsin to Saipan, you're eligible to vote in Wisconsin. Yeah. And the reason for that was inadvertence, because When UCAVA was enacted, there was no Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas. UCAVA was enacted back during the Reagan administration. There was no Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas. So when it was put in place, no one thought to add it in to the provisions of UCAVA. So I've mentioned this before. So there were some people in Saipan who lived in California and said, well, we'll give this a try. We'll vote in California. And not long after they cast their ballots, California taxation authorities came after them. And they decided, maybe this isn't such a good idea after all. Now, I hold that UCAVA is unconstitutional because the Constitution says the people of each state shall decide their electors, et cetera, et cetera. Once you've left the state, you're no longer part of the people of each state. But it's one of those strange things that I think is clearly unconstitutional, but hard to find a procedural challenge that would bring it before the court. All right, let's take a short break here.
Get your shot and win big prizes, Guam. The Office of the Governor and the Guam Visitors Bureau presents Vax and Win, Guam. Protect our community by getting your shot and enter online at visitguam.com/vax for a chance to win. Starting June 14th through July 21st, weekly prizes of $10,000 cash and a brand new car will be given away to lucky residents who are fully vaccinated. That's 6 weeks of Vax and Win opportunities. Some conditions apply. Log on to visitguam.com/vax for official promo rules or to submit your entry today.
Subway double dares you to take the wrap at Subway. Protein packed with double meat for double the flavor. Oh yeah, this is the way to wrap. Choose the smoky, creamy goodness of the turkey, bacon, and guacamole folded in a tomato basil wrap. Or go for the hot one, Chipotle Southwest steak and cheese tucked in a light spinach wrap. However which way you want to pack the protein, these are the wraps you'll be happy to take. Subway, eat fresh.
Subway double meat wraps are available at all Subway locations, including the newly opened Subway NCS right outside the gate.
Okay, so here we are, picking up again with UCAVA. So Weir tried that, and he couldn't get to first base with that one either. Equal protection. People in the Northern Marianas can, people on Guam can't, therefore denial of equal protection. That one didn't get him very far either, but he keeps trying, saying things like, your ability to vote shouldn't depend on what your zip code is. Very good at coming up with the slogans like second-class citizen and things like that that fit much better into his ability to raise funds for his nonprofit. I just have to wonder if there aren't interests in Puerto Rico that are interested in giving Neil Weir at least moral support, if not financial support. But that's, again, just my speculation and my suspicious mind. I just wonder, after a while, you know, when you've tilted at 47 windmills, you finally figure out that they're not dragons. They really are windmills. So I have I'm going to take a call here in just a second. I'm finished up with Amata versus Weir. Personal experience today, I noticed that Sherry mentioned lizards. I was walking around Paris Acres today, and I looked down at the ground, and I saw what looked like a small green lizard, a bright green lizard. Just like the chameleons you used to buy at county fairs.
Uh-huh.
Do we have actual chameleons here on this island? I've never seen one before.
We do, but we don't have county fairs.
Yeah, that makes it probably hard for them to survive.
I've seen small, not the conventional chameleon, but we have the smaller.
Well, this guy was about this long, counting his tail. Bright green. If anybody knows anything about chameleons on the island, I'd really like to know. Okay, so I got Repeat and another Joe. And Repeats wants to talk about where. Okay, let me have it, Repeat.
Yes, sir. Well, I just wanted to tell you first, the chameleons are down at the legislature.
Yeah, they can change from Democrat to Republican depending on what they happen to be sitting on, right?
Right now they're striped.
Yeah. Or who comes into town, like Neil Weir. You know, I just wanted to say that listening to what you read makes him sound like a bad sports.
Yeah.
You know, and I shared this in a different forum, but he used to run track and field here on Guam, and one race he lost to this guy named Nicanor, and just by a hair, and he got so upset that he pushed Nick down on the ground for beating him. So, anyways, just thought I'd throw that out there because his bad sports seems to always surface.
So this was a track event. It wasn't wrestling.
Right, it was a track.
Not wrestling.
Yeah. He used to run track. Yeah.
Except for Weir. Right. Weir turned a track meet into a wrestling match, right?
Yeah. Okay. Because he wanted everyone to be American, that's why, or U.S. citizens.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Pete.
All right, Uncle Bob.
Yeah.
That was his first powerful dissent.
Yeah, powerful dissent. Okay, another Joe. Good afternoon, another Joe.
So you're saying something about a bright green lizard, and the only lizards I can think of that are bright green are anoles. When they have that red, they puff up their throat, and it becomes red. I'm not sure that's what you were looking at.
No, I'm looking at what looked to me like a chameleon that we used to see. You know, they're not native to many parts of America, but you used to be able to buy them. In fact, buy them and wear them on your shirt. You know, they came with a little harness, so you could actually pin it to your shirt. I don't think you could get away with that with PETA in the picture anymore, but that's exactly what it looked like. It looked like an American chameleon. It was bright green. I've never seen one on Guam before.
I have to take a look at the picture some other time. But you're talking about the territories, and it seems that this Neil, he's wanting to capitalize or to be a leader in regards to a movement, but as you say, it's not in the interest of the people who want to the situation is we can keep Section 30 money. We're not required to follow a lot of the laws. Plus, if anyone wants to push for independence, Guam becomes an incorporated territory. That's out the window. So if he keeps saying that he wants independent Guam, but he wants to be incorporated with the U.S.
No, he's not saying he wants an independent Guam.
No,
he's not. He's at cross purposes with the separatists. He's at cross purposes with those who really want self-determination. He's out there by himself.
But they don't know that.
But they don't know that. He does, I suspect, but they don't know that.
So he's for statehood? Is that what it is? Or
yeah. Well, he wants people to be able to vote. He doesn't care statehood or no statehood. He wants people in the territories to be able to vote. That's his raison d'etre.
Yeah, I can't imagine the separatists or the Chamorro identity movement would want what he wants. I don't know of anyone of that movement.
Well, Melvin Wanpat, one of the leaders of the separatist movement, has said, this has got to be about more than just being able to vote. That's not what we want, just being able to vote. We want self-determination, which for them means independence.
Yeah, they're confusing. They're kind of confused. I think I hear music in the background. So, but
good talking to you, another Joe.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for your time, Dakota.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Back in his own bed, I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. President Biden returning to the White House late last night from his foreign trip and Wednesday's Russian summit meeting.
President Biden called the discussion with President Putin good after touching on many issues. For example,
we discussed in detail the next steps our country should take on arms control measures, the steps we need to take to reduce the risk of unintended conflict.
Dissident Alexei Navalny's plight was also not off the table for Biden during the meeting.
We'll continue to raise issues of fundamental human rights.
The president says the baseline has been set to deal with Russia, and he intends for the dialogue to continue.
Fox's Gernal Scott, congressional reaction to the summit.
Democrats like Jean Shaheen of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee backed up President Biden. She put out a statement saying the president stood his ground and sent the message that the United States will hold Russia accountable for actions that threaten our national security and global stability.
Fox's Jill Nato, and from Ohio Republican Senator Rob Portman.
My hope is that it will not just be strong rhetoric, but actually strong actions. And same with regard to Ukraine, Georgia, and other countries who we ought to allow into NATO.
Senator Portman on Fox's Your World with Neil Cavuto. The items awaiting the president on his return and infrastructure compromise, hammered out by a bipartisan group of senators. Before leaving Geneva, the president admitting,
I honestly haven't seen it. I don't know what the details are. I know that my chief of staff thinks there's some room that there may be a means by which to get this done.
The compromise now has the support of 20 senators, and supporters say would not hike taxes. The House is expected to approve a bill today repealing the 2002 authorization for the use of military force in Iraq. Democrat leader Chuck Schumer plans to bring the repeal legislation up in the Senate sometime this year. America is listening to Fox News.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. We're back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have MyCloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Should Catholic pro-choice politicians be barred from receiving the sacraments? There could be a decision on that soon.
The stakes are high for American bishops this week, scheduled to debate whether to draft a formal document that will set a national standard on who is fit to receive Holy Communion, a vital sacrament in the Catholic Church. Specifically, whether pro-abortion rights Catholic politicians like President Joe Biden and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi should be denied communion because of their aggressive policies promoting what the Church considers a grave evil. San Francisco Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone says there is urgency to act. With the election of Biden, arguably the most pro-abortion rights president ever and a Catholic, he argues that bishops must exert their authority to clarify and unify the Church's position.
Fox's Lauren Green, a man who police say drove drunk into a crowd of protesters in Minneapolis over the weekend, killing one of them, has now been charged with murder.
Is an aggressive charge? Yes, it is.
But we think we need to make a statement that this kind of conduct is simply not acceptable, and we're going to use the power of this office to try to say that.
Hennepin County, Minnesota prosecutor Michael Freeman says they could not find sufficient evidence to charge Nicholas Krause with a hate crime. The pandemic may be fading, but some scary insects are back.
Scientists have found a dead so-called murder hornet north of Seattle. Investigators believe the deceased Asian giant hornet is the first one to be found in the country this year. The 2-inch-long invasive insects first found along the U.S.-Canadian border in December of 2019 are native to Asia. Their sting is extremely painful, and the murder hornets can be deadly to humans in rare cases, but scientists say the real threat is to honeybees and native hornets. Tom Graham, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro and Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Get your shot and win big prizes, Guam. The Office of the Governor and the Guam Visitors Bureau presents Vax and Win, Guam. Protect our community by getting your shot and enter online at visitguam.com/vax for a chance to win. Starting June 14th through July 21st, weekly prizes of $10,000 cash and a brand new car will be given away to lucky residents who are fully vaccinated. That's 6 weeks of Vax and Win opportunities. Some conditions apply. Log on to visitguam.com/vax for official promo rules or to submit your entry today.
Chili's is bringing you a full meal offer with 3 for me for just $15. You get a beverage, a starter, and an entree. First, choose from a refreshing Coca-Cola or iced tea, pick a starter, then select your choice of a mouth-watering entree, like Cajun pasta with grilled chicken, ranchero chicken tacos, or the savory Santa Fe burger. Dine in today or visit chilisguam.com for delivery and to-go options. Chili's, 3 for me for just $15. Available for a limited time. Chili's, savor the moment.
Hey, big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community, yet national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play. So a great halftime show, a powerful halftime show today, right? Yeah. And here we are in the second half of Tall Tales. First item on the card for the second half is the governor of Guam plus critical race theory versus the United States of America. And this comes from an article in the Post. Now, once again, critical race theory has become very popular. It's something that is actually an offshoot of the scholarship of a group called the Frankfurt School. It started in 1922. I've talked about that on numerous occasions. Picked up by a guy named Antonio Gramsci. And it is a Marxist strategy that instead of relying on a revolution of the working class against the bourgeoisie,
relies on the ability of Marxists to penetrate the institutions of democratic countries, their colleges, universities, high schools, grade schools.
Gullible politicians.
Police forces, news media especially, and to work with people's minds to the point that they think that they are really in a sad situation and that their best bet is going to be embrace a Marxist system instead of the one they're in right now. And the way it works is this. You start out with long ago historical events upon which you can build a grievance. Now, for African Americans, it's the Hannah Jones's 1619 theory that the first 20 African slaves were brought to Jamestown in 1619, which isn't correct, but that's her theory. And since that time, America has been built based on slavery. The reason that the 13 colonies rebelled against Britain, because they were afraid that the Brits were going to abolish slavery in the colonies. That's the reason for the Revolutionary War. And all this talk about freedom and Constitution, etc., is just camouflage because the country, being based on a racist beginning, is so systemically racist that it cannot be fixed. There's no sense trying to troubleshoot it, improve upon it, reform it. You just got to get rid of it and replace it with Marxism. That's what critical race theory is all about. One who believes in critical race theory will tell you that everything that happens must always be viewed from a racist perspective. Okay, now I'll give you an example of critical race theory here. It's Guam's position at the United Nations thanks to our governor. Here's the first sentence of this article in the Post. The United States government is threatening the social, economic, and overall well-being of Guam and her people, according to Governor Leon Guerrero. Threatening social, economic, and overall well-being of the people. So what? We send in the troops? Send in the army to save the people? This is happening right now.
Like right now.
Right this instant. The United States government is threatening the social, economic, and overall well-being of Guam. I can see why a lot of guys have gone through that concealed weapons training. It's hardly safe to walk outside unless you're packing.
Didn't somebody win a lottery yesterday? A car and some $10,000?
Yeah. And you know who won the prize?
Somebody who was vaccinated?
Yeah, it was the brother of Tina Rose Munya Barnes.
Yeah, that was interesting.
And I was surprised by something. I was surprised by how many were surprised that Tina's brother won.
I was surprised that no news media ever reported that.
Yeah, but I mean, okay.
But I just think it's funny that that what funded that lottery was a government that's threatening the social, economic, and overall well-being of Guam and her people.
Well, it must be the economic well-being because they think they could just sit around and win prizes instead of actually working, right? Remarks from the island's chief executive, that's the governor, were presented to the United Nations Special Decolonization Committee by, and be ready for this now, Jose, by Tony Babauta, the governor's former chief of staff, who really made himself a name for himself on the 19th floor. So, you know, sometimes, you know, there's an old saying, the medium is the message. And this time, the messenger was the message. You know, we took somebody that got canned as an assistant secretary of Interior for misconduct. Somebody who apparently got canned by Governor Leon Guerrero on very short notice. And now he is going to be representing us in an international forum.
Makes
Now,
sense.
I think the average evaluation is this, that when you send somebody to represent you somewhere, you send your best. You know, you don't send the third string. You send your varsity players, your all-stars, etc. So you got to wonder what the folks at the United Nations who've done a little research thought about Tony Babauta. Babauta happened to be in Washington, D.C. when the administration learned of UN's requirement that remarks be submitted in person, according to Melvin Wanpat, director of the Commission on Decolonization. Quote, as a nation founded on demands for equality, representation, and democracy, I don't recall the United States being founded on a demand for equality. That's France you're thinking of. Liberté, equality, égalité, fraternity. The United States' control of its colonies violates the very essence of its principles as a nation and contradicts their commitment to the UN Charter, Leon Guerrero wrote. The Chamorro people deserve the same opportunity to control their political destiny as our administering powers' founding fathers did. Leon Guerrero is now requesting that the committee include in its official report. Now, this is complicated, and it goes back to what I've been saying all along about the reparateurs. Leon Guerrero is now requesting that the committee include in its official report a letter written by 3 special rapporteurs of the UN, which detail the present situation on the island, including the planned realignment of Marines from Okinawa to Guam. So there is a special, excuse me, what's the name of that committee? Yeah, there is a United Nations Special Decolonization Committee. And, okay, and then there's also a Commission on Human Rights, and that's where the rapporteurs came from. We were told
That's the one.
that they were the Commission on Human Rights. To find out they're not, they're sort of like independent contractors. And my having studied what they wrote and having studied what what's his name, Julian Uggan submitted to the organization that submitted that paper, my sense is that Julian Uggan basically wrote those letters for the 3 rapporteurs. Very convenient. It's kind of like using the PNC method of reporting the news, right? So now they want those letters included in the official report letter written by 3, as you were, they want that included in the Committee on Decolonization's report. And then a quote, our colonial powers' ongoing militarization of Guam constitutes a violation of several human rights. Now, whenever you see the statement human rights, you know, that should alert you that somebody's going to try to fool you about something. We have a Constitution in the United States and we have a Bill of Rights. And we got a pretty good handle on what the Bill of Rights kind of guarantees for us. But when you start talking about human rights, you know, you're talking about clean water and fast internet, and there's no limit to it. Our colonial powers' ongoing militarization of Guam constitutes a violation of several human rights. The governor also said the military buildup has resulted in the clearing of key habitats of endangered species, the destruction of historic and cultural sites, including those of 1,000-year-old burials that no one even knew they were there or even cared about.
And that's just Tumon.
Yeah. The National Defense Strategy is just one long-standing issue gripping the island directly caused by Guam's territorial status. Now, the thing that people don't understand is this. that there are 50 states, and in many of those 50 states there are military bases. And if the United States wanted to build a military base in Wisconsin, and I've seen it happen, they built a very small air control and warning station south of my hometown, theoretically to protect Chicago, which was about 80 miles away. It tells you about technology back in those days, right? So what did they do? They just went in and bought the land and built their base. And, you know, about 2 years after we found out that that was going to happen, we see guys in blue uniforms turning up in town. They didn't ask the mayor of the city, could we build, or the county board, or even the state governor. They just went ahead and did it. The national government has the power of eminent domain. They can condemn land for military bases. And I've mentioned this before too. Fort Hood, Texas, Killeen, Texas. When the United States needed that large training area for World War II, they came in and wiped out 6 villages, condemned the whole thing, wiped out 6 villages, set up that base. And that's what the kind of power that the U.S. government has. Fort Polk, as were Fort Campbell, Kentucky, most of which is in Tennessee, same thing. So a state does not have a veto power over the activities of the national government when it comes to eminent domain, building military bases, etc. My suspicion is that the military probably pays more attention to the government here than it does in a place like Texas or California.
Yeah, I don't think that other places have had archaeologists. Was a SHPO have it by law an archaeologist on site?
Yeah.
When I was a kid growing up in Camp Drum in New York, it became a bigger base, larger base, and they actually, it was acres and hundreds of acres of land that was fenced off from the public that have been using that land for years, decades, and they didn't have an archaeologist. They didn't have all these other kind of reports that we have here on Guam. I think they've done, you know, it might not be satisfactory work, but they've been doing over and beyond, I think, what the military usually does in other places.
I would tip my hat to them. Yeah, and it's a little disingenuous to say 1,000-year-old burial sites that have been out in the boonies for 1,000 years. Nobody knew they were there. The only reason that we found out they're there is because the military's come in and cleared the land. If the military hadn't cleared the land, would the local government, would the local separatists go out there and look around for? No. It's a classic case of finding something to bitch about and then attempting to perfect some kind of a right based on your grievance politics. Quote, despite the harmful and significant impacts of these colonial byproducts, and you have to use the word colonial, Lou herself, of course, is a Quisling, because Lou presides over the colonists' government, a government established by an act of Congress. And Quisling is a word that became popular after World War II. A guy named Vidkun Quisling was a Norwegian who collaborated with the Germans so that he could become Prime Minister of Norway. So Lou, you're a Quisling. So quit complaining about colonialization. If you really want to establish some credibility, quit your job and say, I am not going to work for the colonizer. I'm going to work for whoever it is that you think you're working for. I'm not going to take any of their money. I'm going to do this just like Nehru did. I'm sorry, Gandhi did. Gandhi didn't hold a governmental position. Despite the harmful and significant impacts of these colonial byproducts, the United States military's unchecked actions within the lands and waters of Guam only serve to compound these problems and further hinder the achievement of our full social, economic, and political potential, she wrote. Yeah, you know, the the U.S. colonial presence here in Guam has really hurt the economic development of this island, right?
And again, she might disagree, or other people might disagree with what the military is doing, but to state in an official letter that it's unchecked actions is just flat wrong.
It is. Absolutely. This is demagoguery at its worst. In her remarks, Leon Guerrero recognized the Biden administration for being proactive in recognizing the inequity of the relationship between themselves and their territories, but still criticized the federal government's history of responding to decades of advocacy about decolonization with seemingly deaf ears. I haven't heard a whole lot of advocacy coming from the other side about decolonization. I can't think of any. The governor told the committee she personally requested the White House support federal legislation to authorize a vote that allows the Chamorro people. Now, we're not talking about Chamorro people here. I mean, we're not talking about decolonization. We're talking about Chamorro people, and that's why this is shown on the card as Lou and critical race theory. This is not decolonization. This is critical race theory. You've done all these horrible things to these people. Now you've got to do something for them. These other people, it's kind of like the votes. He said, I want to work with the native inhabitants. Remember that? Yeah. Has she always been this way, Tony? Has she ever said anything that's inconsistent with what she's saying in her letter here?
Funny you should say that, because not too long ago, I want to say back in March, Biden, it looked like when Biden signed the, what was it called, the American American Repair Plan, the relief bill, I think Guam received $661 million. And she said that the plan puts the needs of people above all else, giving much needed relief to our frontliners and working people. And she said, since the announcement of the American Rescue Plan, our administration has advocated for Guam's inclusion in all programs, as well as the ultimate passage of this bill. The people of Guam, help is on the way.
Yeah, that doesn't...
Very welcoming.
Yeah, that doesn't square very well with threatening the social, economic, and overall well-being of Guam, does it?
Unless you treat your words and your philosophies like a buffet.
Yeah.
Just pick and choose what you want.
Pick and choose what you want to say today. And yeah, I haven't been a Governor Leon Guerrero fan from the get-go, and this is a classic reason why, you know. And my suspicion is that she's just caving in to the separatists around her.
But we're all listening.
We're all listening, yeah. Yeah, this isn't this. You stick to your own echo chamber, Lou. Okay. In her remarks, Leon Guerrero recognized the Biden administration for being proactive in recognizing the inequity of the relationship between themselves and their territories. There's that word equity again, right? The governor told the committee she personally requested the White House support federal legislation to authorize a vote that allows the Chamorro people to express their political desires for the first time in nearly 40 years. So she personally told, yeah, hello, Joe? Yeah. Hey, Lou, this is Lou. Could you do me a favor? I would like to see that letter. I'd like to see the proposed legislation that she submitted. I would like to see her correspondence back and forth with Michael St. Nicholas. Ironically, as it may sound, none of our Washington delegates have ever advanced anything like this.
Well, I heard Biden said he's going to send the vice president down to meet us here in Guatemala.
Yeah, he's going to send the vice president to deal with the territories, right? Vice President Harris, I understand you've been appointed to deal with the territories. Which territory are you going to go to first? I've never been to Europe. We got to work. Can you work on a sound effect?
I will do something.
A Kamala sound effect?
Definitely.
We can give the real Joe Cruz.
We might lose listeners, but sure, we'll get it.
Okay, then she goes on to say this. While the recognition of the historical harms and injustices caused by the insular cases, again, you don't really want self-determination, Lou. And the lack of national suffrage has been a long time and must continue to be pursued. Stupid. Stupid. Have Neil Weir help you with the national suffrage. I'm sure he's up to the task. Our administrating power is presented with yet another chance to rectify its colonial past and resolve Guam's political status, Leanne Guerrero wrote, as public and congressional discourse surrounding the insular cases and national voting rights continues. It is my administration's position that while these measures of justice will provide much needed relief to the people of the territories, they cannot take the place of an exercise of self-determination and genuine decolonization. Well, if Guam were decolonized tomorrow, Governor, you would be like Cinderella. What would you turn into at midnight? You'd no longer be the governor, would you? The governor reiterated previous requests as recently as 2019 for the UN to send a visiting mission to assess the island's current level of self-government and determine the progress that has been made toward decolonization. Leanne Guerrero told the committee that despite objections and obstructions from the U.S. federal government, any visiting mission will find Guam is ready for a vote on political status. Yeah, that's why so many people went down to sign up on that registry. The governor said she hopes to give the body an update in 2022 that a plebiscite was held or has been scheduled. The United States must remain true to its commitment to equality and justice and give the Chamorro people of Guam a meaningful opportunity to self-determine and decide what kind of relationship they wish to have with their administering power. Okay, let's head for the Wrigley Field in the seventh inning stretch. I notice I've got our Carl and Kellis all in the bullpen there in Wrigley Field. Got a little bit more to do on this, and then I'll work with our Carl and Kellis.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Indulge Dad this Father's Day with a well-prepared pairing from Pro Restaurant and Budweiser, the king of beers. Pro's specialized menu includes a slow-roasted, herb-crusted prime rib and an Amberbach barbecue-glazed pork chop. Pair Dad's meal with the Bud family for $3.50, Kona beers for $4, or Ironstone wines for $5. For dads with a sweet tooth, Pro Patisserie has created a milk tea mousse stout beer cake glazed with chocolate. To reserve a table, call Pro Restaurant at 646-PROA. Budweiser reminds you to drink responsibly.
After that big, as you were, big halftime. No, the seventh inning stretch here in Wrigley Field in Chicago. I'm back on loose paper here. What she told the United Nations. The The United States must remain true to its commitment to equality and justice and give the Chamorro people of Guam a meaningful opportunity to self-determine and decide what kind of relationship they wish to have with the administering power. And I keep bringing this up. So the only determination that is necessary is of a racial group called the Chamorros. So let's say that Congress said, yes, you could have your Chamorro-only vote. And let's just say, hypothetically, most of the people say, we want to be separate from the United States. What happens to the rest of us, the majority of people on this island that don't happen to be of the favored racial group? Are we all packed up on boats and sent to Saipan, sent to the nearest American territory?
You know, Sandra asked a very good question.
Yeah.
On whose authority does she write this letter? Now, if someone says, well, she was voted in as the governor, so she has a mandate, but it wasn't just Chamorros who voted for her in this election. So who mandated her to do this?
And she didn't campaign on this kind of garbage
Not at
either.
all.
Yeah. So if the Chamorros get to choose, what happens to the rest of us? So if I think what the answer would be, so the vote comes out pro-independence. Congress meets and said, okay, we heard, effective the 1st of January 2023, we withdraw all sovereignty from the island of Guam. What happens next?
Or what happens to us Chamorros? That hasn't been answered either.
To everybody, because all of a sudden we went from a place that had a structured government that worked pretty well, not perfect, but pretty well, to a place that has no government. That'll be a lot of fun. Or because I haven't heard any of the separatists say, if Guam were independent, this is what we would want to do. This is what we would have to set up before independence occurred. You know, some of the most horrible scenes in the history of the world occurred after decolonization. Take a look at India and Pakistan as an example. Is that kind of the game plan for here? So this is an emotional, racist statement that is obviously not well thought out, not well planned, and for that reason is not going to have any credibility with anybody, because a U.S. congressman is going to say the same thing. So you want to have the self-determination vote, and how many people are on your island? About 165,000. How many of those are Chamorros? Maybe 36%. So the other people are not going to vote? Isn't that kind of, pardon the expression, un-American? Yeah. Lou, you're on a fool's errand here, but you're appealing to what you think is your base. But it's clearly an example of critical race theory. You take the historical event, you pretend it happened yesterday, you say that the only way that the system cannot be reformed or improved, the only thing that can happen is you got to change it and you can come in with a completely new regime, an independent Guam. And, you know, she talks about decolonization. And I hear, you know, Guam, you've got to decolonize Guam. Well, we have a Chapter 21 in Title I of the Government Code. And I've pointed this out before. Chapter 21, Commission on Decolonization for the Implementation and Exercise of Chamorro Self-Determination. So our Commission on Decolonization is not a Commission on Decolonization. It's a Commission on the Exercise of Chamorro Self-Determination. So if you're not Chamorro, you have no role in this decolonization undertaking, because it's self-determination for the Chamorro people, not for the colony of Guam, not for the island of Guam, not for those of us who live on Guam, only for the Chamorro people. So, you know, a lot of people don't see through that. They think decolonization and Chamorro self-determination are synonyms, but they're not. It's two totally different ideas. So let me see. I've got R. Carl here on line one. Go for it, R. Carl.
Hey, Bob. Good afternoon. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in about why America is even out here. I mean, there's no minerals on Guam that they're after. It's not a large land mass. You know, there's really not much to be gained here except to stand as a how would you say?
Well, Guam has only three assets, R. Carl, and a real estate broker would tell you what those three assets are. Location, and location.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Our location is our greatest strength, and it's also our greatest weakness.
But if you look back at America's involvement, you know, there's a lot of condemnation of America. Oh, militarization. You know, but when you look back at America's involvement in these major conflicts, for example, in Europe during World War II, after over 400,000 young Americans, young and old American military, dying during that conflict, they didn't take any major countries in Europe. They didn't take over Germany and make it part of the United States. They didn't take over Japan. As a matter of fact,
all we got out of it was pizza.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Of course, Russia, got a lot of real estate out of that. They got their Eastern Bloc countries, their puppet countries that they had for many years and didn't give up voluntarily. And then there's Korea, in which America sacrificed over 30,000 soldiers, and Vietnam, which I believe was over 50,000 soldiers. And in none of these cases did they, take over any major landmass. So what they were trying to do was trying to stand guard against the advancement of socialism and communism. Even in World War II, Germany was a socialist country. That Nazi means National Socialist German Workers' Party, and they're still doing that. And we see socialism. I think we should call it what it is: communism. The Chinese Communist Party advancing out into the Pacific and across the globe, and they have set a goal of being the sole world superpower by 2049. Not one of the major superpowers, the sole superpower. So, all this talk is just delusional. I mean, it's, what are we supposed to do? Fight off, the communists with, throw coconuts at them or something? I mean,
if Guam were independent, China would have so much respect for our cultural dances that we've been doing since 1987, and the songs and chants we've been doing since 1987, that they wouldn't even think about stepping foot on Guam. That's how it would work.
Yeah, I don't think so. They're going to be on Guam's politicians like white on rice. And they'll be here with...
That's kind of racist, Carl.
Yeah. They'll be here with suitcases of money. And there's a certain class of politicians that like that idea, having their loyalties put up to bid. I think I might have mentioned before 60 Minutes Australia segment I saw in which they visited various South Pacific islands. And one of the island leaders openly said he was approached by a representative of the Chinese Communist Party and offered $1 million to switch his loyalties, his island's loyalties, to the Chinese Communist Party. And that's exactly what would happen here. And I think there are certain politicians that relish that idea. If things don't go right on Guam, well, they've got their money, just take off and leave. Who cares?
Interesting points, Carl.
Yeah. Anyway, but there's, my main point is there's a reason that the military is here, just like in Vietnam. Although it didn't turn out like they wanted it to in Korea, where they had a free Korea and a communist Korea. We lost that war in the press and in academia, although we won it on the battlefield. But anyway, yeah, that's my main point.
Okay, Arcro. Always good to have the most dangerous man in the room on the line. Okay, so we're going to head for Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky. When I get back, I'm going to listen to R. Kellis for a few minutes. Not R. Kellis, Kellis. He doesn't need to be R. Kellis. He is Kellis. Sui generis, right? And then I've got another Joe after that.
Busy week? Mescla Bistro in Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Get your shot and win big prizes, Guam. The Office of the Governor and the Guam Visitors Bureau presents Vaccine Win Guam. Protect our community by getting your shot and enter online at visitguam.com/vax for a chance to win. Starting June 14th to July 21st, we'll be giving away weekly prizes of $10,000 cash and a brand new car to lucky residents who are fully vaccinated. That's 6 weeks of Vaccine Win opportunities. Some conditions apply. Log on to visitguam.com/vax for official promo rules or to submit your entry today. Let's Vaccine Win, Guam!
So here we are, Kellis, wandering around Churchill Downs in Louisville. What can you tell me this afternoon?
Well, I got three things. I'll try to be fast. So one, would the governor be willing to give up this $600 million from Uncle Fed to be, to show how strong she is for this self-determination, or you know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
Two, so this vote that we're talking about, there is a vast majority of Chamorros that do not live on Guam. So you'll have people that haven't been on Guam for 50 years, or you also have Chamorros that have actually never been on Guam who would be able to vote. And now they might, because they don't want to come back to Guam, might change the vote.
Interesting
but then
point.
Three, let's say, for example, for some unknown reason, they do vote and it says, we want to be out. The Chamorros that have never lived on Guam, or the Chamorros that have not been on Guam for 50 years, would they have to come back? Would they be no longer U.S. citizens? If they vote on this?
An interesting point, Kellis. And all of these things are things that have not been addressed at all.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, good. There's an emotional appeal to, we never got a chance to decide our fate. Yeah.
But you know that, and I know because I was in the military for so long, every base I ever went out, there's a huge Chamorro population.
Right.
And like I said, I've met people that have never been to Guam, and I've met people that left Guam in the 50s and are not planning on coming back. But they would be able to vote. Now, you've been here for a couple of years, correct, Judge?
I have indeed.
You would not be able to vote, and I'm just thinking of my mom, but you have all these matriarchs of family that were from Germany, because for a long time a lot of these Chamorro men brought back German wives, and so you got these women that have lived in Guam for 50, 60 years that would not be able to vote.
That's it. It's Chamorro only, and you're absolutely right. If we're going to have Chamorro self-determination, we can't limit it just to the people that happen to be here on election day. Yeah.
Because I remember, because what I'm sitting there thinking of, for the people that are the Chamorro land trusts, you did not have to be in Guam to apply for Chamorro land trust. You just had to prove that you're a Chamorro.
Yeah.
So there are people that are in the states that that already have land or are still on the register that have never been to Guam.
Well, they'll have something to come home to, won't they?
Yeah. So what I'm hoping, well, not really, but so there's a vast majority of Chamorros not living on Guam, and I want them all to vote and to say, because one, they want to probably stay in the States. They don't want to come back to Guam. So I think they'd vote for status quo. Yeah. Otherwise, if they're voting for something else, they might be kicked out of the United States.
And of course, the separatists have very, very cleverly manipulated the questions around so that one wouldn't be able to vote for status quo because, that wouldn't be decolonization.
Okay. Well, I know that you got another Joe on hold, so I just wanted to be as fast as I could, Judge.
Thanks for your consideration, Kellis. Okay, did you hear what Kellis said, another Joe?
That's exactly what the point I wanted to make is the separatists and people who are wanting this actual vote are kind of crafty because they're clever because the only real two choices are either maybe just not really much two choices. It's either independence or statehood, which you've already identified is not an option because we don't have the population. So really, it's a non-starter.
It's independence.
Sorry?
It's just independence. Yeah.
The only thing is independence, and the majority of relatives that I can think of, I don't think the majority of them would side with the independents. I've even had disagreements with some relatives. Say, hey, look, you brought up earlier about the separation between India and Pakistan. I said, yeah, we don't want independence. And they said, why not? Because we'll be killing each other. It's probably a high probability. I mean, look at the Cherokee. Look what they were doing to each other around about the time of maybe right before the Trail of Tears. I don't know. So when they didn't want, they wanted to have their own country, and so the only way you can do that is at the end of a barrel, a gun, to keep what you have. So yeah, it's not going to be a pleasant experience. So I'd say I'd opt for the status quo, which, as you say, they're so clever. They say it's not even an option. But not only the status quo, but the status quo plus, as what Professor McNink said, improve on, like as you say, improve on what we have. What do you think, Bob?
I think that's the only way to go that makes any sense. But of course, we're not talking about things that make sense. We're talking about things that have emotional appeal. We're talking about critical race theory. And there are I suspect some people out on the island who are saying, Klitzkie, apaka na tautono Sagani tolu na itzumoro no hafa bidaniha baba eno. I shouldn't be making my voice heard on the concept of Chamorro self-determination. I don't have standing because I'm not Chamorro.
But your voice is more Chamorro than my voice. I had to wait for the translation.
I think you paid your dues already, Bob. Through you're rearing a family here with your local wife. Anyway, so thanks for your time, Bob, and like I said, I vote for the status quo plus, and the plus is what we are debating. What is that defined as? How do we improve on the plus? As Professor McNick said. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, another Joe, and another Joe said that I had paid my dues, and this is the insidious part of critical race theory and identity politics. There's no way that anyone can pay his dues. And I've said it before, understanding how that part works, ilakono latsi sa ana mafanyago ge giza Guam, giza America, totosan hizung zu, Tomorrow. The Latsi Tahu, Anu Ziziki Parentesu, Di Tomorrow e Tatahu, Di Tomorrow e Nanahu, pues Di Tomorrow Zu. I'll never make that mistake again, Jose.
You are correct, sir.
Yeah, what I said was I really screwed up. I wasn't born here. I was born in the States.
And that's your fault.
And that's my fault. And then I screwed up again when I chose my parents. My father wasn't Chamorro. My mother wasn't Chamorro. Therefore, I'm not Chamorro. I'll never make that. Latsi, uno na biyahe lo titalo na. Okay. Next on the card here is Pinehoff versus Lou. This is the guy that had his bar closed down right around him. I got somebody trying to get in the show here. Let me see. It's our Carl again. One more round for our Carl. He wants to ride the merry-go-round one more time. Our Carl, you're going to get dizzy sitting on that merry-go-round for so long.
I'll make this quick, Bob, because there's not that much time. But there's actually efforts to reach out to Chamorros in the States and present a certain view of what is happening on Guam and what has happened in the past. I think because it may be useful at some point in the future if there's a vote and if enough of them come back or something happens and they can vote, if they have this view of the United States oppressing Guam. So there are efforts going on to reach out to what do you call it? The diaspora.
Diaspora, yeah.
Diaspora, yeah. So that's ongoing. Anyway, I just wanted to make that point.
Interesting point, R. Carl. Thank you very much for chiming in.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay, so I got about 5 minutes to go here. Next item on the card is Pinehoff versus Lou. I know I can't finish that up in 5 minutes, and it deserves a full treatment. I'm sure you're interested in. I think conventional wisdom was, well, Pinehoff sued, good for him, because Lou closed down his bars and he probably forced him almost a penury. So he's got to get some justice here. And I'm going to explain how the court ruled against him on the show tomorrow. So for the rest of the show, let me just go back and see what folks are saying on our Facebook comments. I had a lot of comments today, which is good. Sandra Regis starts out by saying it won't hurt to try. I wonder what she's referring to. And maybe that's part of a thread, right? Colin Clark. Boy, raking in the big bucks at Anderson. Overtime today, keeping you safe, buddy. Sandra Regis, pray for me. I'm done applying for these local jobs. I applied for several federal jobs today. You want to hear about the federal job I applied for, Jose? Yeah, sure. You got to have your beep beep ready because you got to beep out one part of my story, okay? Can you do that? So I applied for this really high-powered kind of secret federal job, taking advantage of all my military, civilian, educational experiences and stuff like that. And I went before this high muckety-muck for an interview. And he starts out by the interview by saying to me, Mr. Klitzkie, what do you consider your biggest weakness? And I said, my honesty. And he said, you know, I think honesty is a strength. And I said, I don't give a what you think.
What was that?
I didn't hear the laugh track there, Jose. Yeah, very good. Yeah, anyhow. Sandra is applying for a job with the feds. Sherry says good luck. And that's the end of that thread. Paul Davis, best of luck. This is kind of like a chat room here.
It went all over the place today.
And then Sandra says, well, thank you, Paul. Just reminded me one of the jobs is in Virginia. Jose, wow, an asinine article?
It went from article to realizing it's a press release.
Oh, okay, I got it. learn something new every day on this show. Well, that's for sure. It's a press release from Weir, not an article. This explains why it's so bad. And then Gary, a good American named Schernholz. Yeah? Gary Schernholz. Lou is off her rocker. You got that one right. And Jose Martinez, a lizard. That's what caused me to ask about the chameleon. Well, I got through another episode of Tall Tales. Tomorrow I'll start off with Pine Off versus Lou. I spent a little slice of heaven today here on Tall Tales. We'll see you all tomorrow.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Back in D.C., I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. President Biden returning from his foreign trip and yesterday's meeting with Vladimir Putin.
Ransomware and cyber attacks were a big topic of this discussion behind closed doors with Biden and Putin. The president says he gave Putin a list of 16 different critical infrastructure types within the United States, basically a do not hack list.
I said, well, how would you feel if ransomware took on the pipelines from your oil fields? He said it would matter.
But Putin tried to turn allegations of cyber mischief back on the U.S.
Fox's Peter Doocy. One agreement from the summit, a return to arms control talks. The Kremlin says they expect them to begin within weeks. Republican South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham believes the president wasn't tough enough.
He told Putin that if you're seen as interfering in an election, it will hurt your credibility and people in the world will have a bad opinion of you. You know what, President Biden? Putin could give a damn about what people think about him.
Senator Graham appearing on Fox News Primetime, citing the supremacy clause in the U.S. Constitution. The Justice Department has warned the state of Missouri they can't ignore federal law. Governor Mike Parson just signed a bill that bans police from enforcing federal gun laws in the Show Me state, saying the Biden administration is ignoring federal immigration laws. Texas Governor Greg Abbott announcing plans for the state to build its own wall at the southern border.
Anyone who thinks this is politics doesn't care about American citizens or Texas residents. Anyone who thinks this is politics doesn't care about the lives of people who had a gun stuck to their head by someone who came across the border, doesn't care about their kids who have been harmed, doesn't care about the homes that have been invaded.
The governor allocating a $250,000 down payment and announcing a crowdfunding drive to help pay for